welcome back. My name is Morgan. This is my channel, Pisces Paperbacks, and today I'm going to be filming my Marcy. Can you please not do that right now? Today I'm going to be filming my wrap-up for March. The first book I read in March is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. This is my favorite book of all time. Gave it 5 stars. I made a really fun reading vlog about it that I was actually really proud of, so I'm going to link that. And if you don't know, this is the story of Jane. She is kind of a plain girl, and she becomes a governess in this big, mysterious house owned by Mr. Rochester. And Mr. Rochester is this smart, kind of moody man, and it's a love story, but there's a lot more that happens. There's a mystery, there's drama, and this is a pretty seminal gothic romance. But I do love this book, and my reread did confirm for me that that love is like true and valid. Up next, I read The Train to Impossible Places by P.G. Bell. This is the story of, oh my god, I forget the character's name. Susie. I think her name is Susie. And one night she is in her bed and she hears this like ruckus going on downstairs, and she discovers a little troll installing train tracks in her kitchen, and she's like, excuse me, what are you doing? And she kind of gets swept up in this big conspiracy through the impossible realms, kind of helping the trolls figure out what's going on. There's like an evil witch involved. I actually really enjoyed this book. I did give it a 3.5 stars though, 3.5 stars. I just feel like the first half was kind of slow to get me really emotionally invested. Obviously, I'm not the target audience. This is a middle grade fantasy. I think one thing that really brought this book down for me personally was the fact that she doesn't really have like oh my god, Marcy just pulled the leg off of her toy. Oh my god. I'll deal with that later. Susie doesn't really have like a friend to go on this adventure with. She sort of makes friends as she goes, but she's keeping a lot of secrets from them for a lot of the story, and it's not like they're best friends yet. And I feel like in a lot of other adventures like this, there's always like a real friend character that the main character can like talk to, have fun with, bounce ideas off of, and it's not like this fraught thing. It's just like a friendship, and I just wish Susie had had a friendship because I feel like that would have made the book a little bit more enjoyable. Up next, I read The 5th Season by N.K. Jemison. I actually started this book in February. I read the first around 30% of it in February and then finished it this month when I got the audiobook back. I unfortunately did not love this book as much as other people, but I still did enjoy it, so again, I gave it a 3.5 stars. I don't really know why. I guess because I guessed the twist at the end, like pretty early on. It was my main theory, so I wasn't really like thrown off or surprised when that was confirmed. I do think it's an incredibly inventive world. If you don't know what The 5th Season is, it is a adult fantasy novel or series. It's a trilogy where basically every couple hundred years there's something called a 5th season, which basically is a natural catastrophe that kills like a lot of civilization. So society as they know it is constantly evolving because it's constantly crumbling and having to be built up again. And it follows 3 different women who are all people who they can control earthquakes and control the earth, but instead of being seen as heroes or saviors, they're really kind of seen as monsters and tools to be controlled by the government. So that's kind of like the vibe of it. I do think it was incredibly well written and crafted together, and I am planning on reading the rest of the series. It just wasn't like my favorite thing I've ever read. Speaking of my favorite thing I ever read, right after that, I read The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Oh my god. 5 stars. This book is masterful. It's beautiful. It's like emotional and dreamy and imaginative and so lovely. So The Starless Sea is about Zachary Ezra Rollins. They call him by his full name a lot, so Zachary Ezra Rollins, and he, when he's in grad school, discovers a book in the library, and one of the chapters is about an experience that happened to him as a child. and he gets swept up in this mystery of trying to discover the Starless Sea and kind of save the Starless Sea from someone who's attacking it, kind of. But it's also about just like the love and joy of storytelling and how stories come together. So a lot of the chapters in this book are small vignettes, kind of fairy tale-esque stories that then connect to and influence and come back around to the main plot thread that is going throughout this book. I love something where things truly come full circle in a way that is like heartwarming, but also like emotionally just, I don't even know how to explain it, but I love this book so much with my entire heart and soul, and I couldn't, from the moment I picked it up, I couldn't put it down. I kind of wish I had read it like 2 weeks later, because I was going through a very stressful, like, oh my god, I can't leave my house, the world is ending moment, and I feel like if I had been reading this, I would have been able to kind of escape that. This is like a pure escapism book. If you are looking for something to cheer you up, calm you down, if you're looking for something to take you away from the stresses of real life and what's happening in the world, I literally can't think of anything better than the Starless Sea. It like is healing to the soul, I swear. I'm getting really emo, but 5 stars. I loved this book. I did not love The Night Circus, so I'm really glad that I enjoyed this book, because I was reading The Night Circus and I was like, I know I could love this author, but this just isn't it. And this is it. This is like, oh my god. Up next, I read A Duke by Default by Alyssa Cole. This is the second book in the Reluctant Royals series. I read the first one last month. That was called A Princess in Theory. I also really enjoyed A Duke by Default, but not as much, so I gave it 4 stars. This book is about Portia, and she decides she's kind of like a flighty socialite in New York. She doesn't really know what she wants to do with her life. She keeps like getting all these weird internships. She feels like she's letting her parents down. She's like the family disappointment. And so she decides that part of her plan to turn her life around is accepting a apprenticeship in Scotland to be the assistant to a sword maker. And, oh, what's the guy's name? Tavish. The guy, the sword maker, his name's Tavish, and he is burly, he's brusque, and stoic, but, like, also very, like, emotionally vulnerable. Ugh, we love to see it. I just think this book was a little, and obviously it's the romance between the two of them. I just think this book was a little bit too, I don't really know. Let me think about it for a second. Something that I appreciate a lot about Alyssa Cole's books is that she takes the time to really build up the relationship that the characters have, like their sexual chemistry, but also their romantic chemistry. And I think this book focused maybe a little too much on their romantic chemistry. Not to say that I don't love like scenes where people talk and get to know each other, but I'm pretty sure there's only 2 sex scenes in this book, and neither of them were like that particularly like interesting or good. They didn't really add to the story, I feel like, but there was a lot of sexual chemistry between them in like other scenes that I really liked. And I don't know, I just think this book was just slightly less interesting. It was a little bit like heavy on like the day-to-day work processes that Portia was doing, and like I just didn't care that much. So I just wish it was like, I don't know, but it was 4 stars. I still really enjoyed it, so I'm kind of talking it down right now. I still did really, I'm looking at my computer right now, sorry. I still did really enjoy this book. I'm absolutely going to keep reading all of these ones and then follow up like the rest of Alyssa Cole's backlog. Like I said last month, I'm obsessed. Next, I read Water for Elephants by Sara Gruen. This tells the story of Jacob Jankowski. He's studying to be a vet at Cornell, and right before his final exams, this tragedy kind of strikes his family, and he ends up kind of running away from his life. Through, a series of events, he finds himself on a circus train and becomes the animal, like the horse specialist animal vet for the circus. There's also interspersed into that story of him working at the circus and kind of building relationships there. Interspersed are chapters where Jacob is a 90-year-old man kind of reflecting on the past and thinking about what it is to age and like what has become of his life now that he's old. Those parts were like super depressing, like crazy depressing. So yeah. This book was really easy to read. It's pretty short. It's only like 330 pages, like really short. I didn't really like it that much. I feel like maybe I just don't like books about the circus because I really didn't enjoy it that much. I thought there were a lot of really stereotyped characters. For example, if you've seen the movie, or if you've read the book, part of the book is that he falls in love with the girl who rides the elephant. Oh my god, what's her name? Marlena. And she also is in charge of the horses. She's the horse tamer or whatever. But Marlena is married to Augustus. I think his name is August, yeah. And he runs like the whole animal department. There's a lot of really bad stereotypes that I just didn't really enjoy reading about. Jacob is Polish and he's constantly referred to as a Pole by the other characters. August is Jewish and he's like several times been just referred to as the Jew. This was just not it for me. Something that really bothered me was that Jacob and Marlena really don't talk. Like they fall in love and it seems to happen in 2 seconds because really Marlena has barely any development at all. She's not a full character. She's not a rounded character. She was like a cardboard cutout of a character. And if you think that I was reading this and I was literally like, Bella and Edward in Twilight have more conversations than Jacob and Marlena do. So before they decide to fall in love in 3 days. So I just wasn't a huge fan. I think I originally gave it 3 stars. I'm definitely going to lower it to a 2.5 or a 2. I haven't really decided yet, but that is kind of the direction that this one is going for me. Next, I listened to Dead Mountain by Donnie, Eichar. This is a nonfiction examination of this tragedy that happened in the 50s. Basically, these 9 hikers, very experienced hikers and outdoors people in Russia decided to go on an excursion in the middle of winter in 1959 and didn't come back. And upon the discovery of their bodies, they were found not wearing shoes. Some of them were half dressed. Some of them had grievous injuries. And it was just what could have possibly happened to make these people leave the safety of their tent. They're all extremely experienced. They were all going on this trip to get their instructors kind of certification. So they, they have the experience. They know what they're doing. What could have possibly happened. And this book is a story of Donnie. He kind of becomes obsessed with trying to figure it out and going to Russia and doing all that stuff. So it's kind of following this whole journey. And then the last half hour of the audiobook was just kind of a step-by-step what he thinks happened the night that the 9 hikers died. I actually really liked this. I gave it 4 stars. It was a 6.5 hour audiobook on YouTube. And I just liked it. I thought that the narrator is a little dry. I think speeding it up was the way to go. I think that some parts of it are maybe not the most grippingly written, but overall it was a really interesting experience. It was to listen to. It was fascinating to listen to the step-by-step what might have happened. And I do think it was a satisfying can we figure out what happened? Can we solve this mystery 60 years later without any witnesses? Can we do this? And I think that was a satisfyingly met requirement and pitch of the book. Next are the 3 books I read for Zodiac-a-thon. Those include I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver, Foul is Fair by Hannah Capin, and let me get it, The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh. So I'm not going to talk about these books in depth because I did talk about them in depth in my vlog, so I will link that up above, but I will give you a quick little rundown. I Wish You All the Best. It's about a non-binary teen kind of coming out to their family, dealing with the consequences, and then trying to survive their senior year of high school. I gave it 4 stars. Nope, I gave it 3.5 stars. I did enjoy it. It was really sweet, but it just wasn't the book for me. It's not my favorite genre. And some parts of it I thought were too cheesy for me to let go. Foul is Fair is the story of a girl named Jade. She is assaulted at a party and decides to take revenge on all the boys that helped it happen by killing them. Bless you. I really loved this book. I gave it 4.5 stars, and I just think that the themes of female friendship and empowerment were like really well done. I loved this book. I didn't particularly love the ending, but like it's fine. It's a super fast read. It's pretty short. It's only like 300 pages. Highly recommend. Can I help you? Can I kiss? Thank you. What a good girl. The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh is a vampire fantasy historical YA thing about Celine. She is fleeing Paris after committing some sort of crime and trying to rebuild her life in New Orleans. And while she's in New Orleans, she kind of gets sucked into this murder mystery underground situation. I didn't particularly love this book either. I gave it 3 stars. I think that what it was trying to do was a little bit confused in terms of, is it a romance? Is it a mystery? I think that should have been clarified more in the editing process because there really isn't much investigation that goes on. And I gave it 3 stars. Because it was well written, I will give it that. And I read it really fast. It was an enjoyable reading experience. The next book I finished was Americanah by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I started reading this like right at the beginning of the month, but it's taken me a while to get through because I just wasn't really motivated to read it. This book is Ifemelu. She is a Nigerian woman who's been living in America for about 13 years and has decided to move back to Nigeria. Right before she moves back, she kind of gets in touch with her high school college sweetheart, Obinze, who was not able to come to America and instead led a very different life during those 13 years, involving some years being undocumented in London and then coming back to Nigeria and making his fortune there. This book is really just following, I should say the primary plot of this is following Ifemelu as she comes to America and kind of discovers race. That is really like, it's a race novel about race in America from the perspective of an African woman. The author is also Nigerian. I think the writing is really well done. It's a quick read. The last 200 pages are the most interesting. There are also sections where, like, I don't know if you can see the font difference, but there's sections where it's Ifemelu's blog posts are part of the book. I admit, fully skip those. They were really boring and I didn't want to read them. There was a lot of humor in this book, the kind of like dry humor. I am glad that I read it now that I'm finished it. I don't know if I would read it again. I don't think I'm going to read it again, although I am glad I own it because I like the cover. I gave it 3 stars and I'm going to be talking about this book with my work book club, which I think will make all the difference. Next, I finished The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. This is the first book of short stories in the Witcher series. I did start this book for Zodiacathon, and I read about the first 70% of it, and then I finished it. In Americanah and this book, I finished both of them in my 24 in 48 weekend reading challenge vlog that I will also link above. I'm really proud of that. I'm really excited for this series to start, and I think that was a really fun way to kick it off. But yes, so I finished The Last Wish. I didn't particularly love the last story. I mean, that's kind of hard with short story collections. I say as if I've read like any short story collections, but I've heard people say that the hard thing about short story collections is that there's always going to be some that you enjoy more than others. That is absolutely true from my experience. I did not particularly like the last story in the book, which is unfortunate because I think that story is the setup for the rest of the series. But I gave it 4 stars. It was a super fun read. I really loved the humor in this book. Like, I thought it was so funny. I love the main character. I think his name is Geralt, like Gerald, but Geralt. Maybe I've been saying it wrong this whole time. I can't wait to watch the show, and I'm just excited about this series. The next book I started and finished during the 24 in 48 reading vlog thing that I did was All Night Long by Jayne and Krentz. This is the story of Irene. She was 15 when kind of this tragedy struck and her parents both died. And she left the town she grew up in and didn't come back until now, 17 years later. The friend that she was out with the night that her parents died has contacted her and is like, I have something really important to tell you. I can't say it over email. I need to see you in person. Please come back to town. So she's back and she's staying in the hotel owned by Luke Danners, I believe his name is. Luke Danner. And he is an ex-Marine who has decided to buy this lake house to find some peace and quiet. And he kind of gets involved with the whole scandal, and they fall in love. I actually really enjoyed reading this. This is one of the better books by this author that I've read in a while, which is great because this is my favorite author, my favorite romance author. And I just had a really good time. I thought the characters had a lot of chemistry, and the sex scenes were like fine. The mystery itself actually like moved along at a good mystery pace. Like there was clues that they then investigated and then found more clues from and then followed up on, and there was like danger but also emotional like conversations. And I am talking it up a lot. I will say this book like objectively is not the highest quality book. Like it's not like a work of literary genius, but I just had such a fun time reading it. I read it all in one day, mostly in one sitting, and I just had a good time. I still don't know what I'm gonna rate it. I think I have it on my list right now as 3.5 stars but I liked reading it more than I liked reading I Wish You All the Best, which I also gave 3.5 stars. But this is like, that's an objectively like better written book than this is. So I don't really know what I'm doing about the rating yet, but I just had a good time with this one. I just liked it. Lastly, a book that I started during my most recent reading vlog and ended yesterday on the 30th is The Help by Kathryn Stockett. Obviously, this is like a pretty famous book. It was made into a movie starring a whole lot of very talented actresses. Let me give you the synopsis. This book is basically about several different maids, black maids in Jackson, Mississippi during the 60s, I believe. And they, along with Miss Skeeter, who's a white woman, decide to anonymously write a book of stories by maids telling what it is like to work for white women and raise their children. My problem with this book, like, because here's the thing, it is objectively, I would say, well written. Like, the writing style is good. The storytelling is clearly by someone who knows what they're doing in terms of storytelling. The author's a white woman, and I've heard, I think when I was doing some research, I read that the reason she even decided to write this story is because she grew up with a black maid and never once kind of wondered what her maid's life was like outside of taking care of her and her family. So I feel like when you come from that point of privilege, you probably shouldn't write a book where 2 of the 3 main characters are black maids, because they just end up being stereotypes. Aibileen, one of the main characters, is like a magical, like, she like has a connection to God, and her prayers are like more powerful than other people's, so kind of spiritual, magical, like guidance kind of stereotype. And then Minnie is like an angry black woman who has a lot of babies and her husband beats her, and like it's just, I would say, piles of stereotypes on top of each other with not enough nuance to really make it work. And I just don't know how I feel about it. Right now I have it down as a 2-star read. I am reading it with one of my friends, and we're going to talk about it, so I think that will help a little bit, because I don't know how I feel about it. Mostly I feel kind of about it, and that's kind of all I can really say. With that is all the books I read in March. With that, I am going to sign off. I read a whole lot of books this month, and I quite enjoyed some of them, and I can't wait to keep reading, and I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. Let me know if you're planning to read any of these books, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!